Is Jimmy Butler the greatest trade asset in NBA history? What's going on, guys? Welcome back to episode 4 of Transaction History, where I take an NBA player and look through their trades and transactions to see how they've altered the landscape of the NBA today. Last week, we dove into Dallas Mavericks guard Kyrie Irving, and today we are diving into Miami Heat wing Jimmy Butler. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment who you want to see next on Transaction History. Let's get into it. Jimmy Butler spent 3 seasons as a member of the Marquette Golden Eagles, making it to the Sweet 16 in his final year. Butler would go on to declare for the 2011 NBA Draft, where he would end up being selected with the final pick in the first round to the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls were coming off a 62-win regular season, backed by MVP winner Derrick Rose. Most teams don't expect to land anyone significant when picking this late in the first round, but the Bulls would help develop Butler and see him blossom into a star just a few seasons later. Butler's rookie season was nothing to boast about, playing 42 games and averaging just 2.6 points. He would start to show progression in his second year, establishing himself as one of the better wing defenders in the NBA. However, in his third year, he'd earned that starting spot and his career would take off. He'd jump from 13.1 points per game in his third season to 20 points per game in his fourth year, while also earning Most Improved Player of the Year honors. While Derrick Rose's injuries would derail his career, a new star in Butler took the reins of the franchise. He'd spend 6 years in total with the Bulls, earning 3 All-Star appearances and establishing himself as one of the best two-way wings in the association. While Butler was great, the team wasn't trending upward and they were wasting the prime of his career. In Butler's final season, the Bulls won just 41 games and lost in the first round to the Boston Celtics. With that being said, they decided to make a move on from Butler in the 2017 offseason to rebuild the franchise. On June 22, 2017, the Chicago Bulls agreed to a deal to send Jimmy Butler and 2017's 16th overall pick Justin Patton to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a package of Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and 2017 7th overall pick Lauri Markkanen. Butler's move to Minnesota would pair him alongside promising young duo of Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins, as the Timberwolves believed Butler could be the missing piece to get them into the playoffs. As for Chicago, they turned their all-star wing into 3 promising young assets to begin their rebuild in the Windy City. Butler's tenure in Minnesota wasn't long, stretching 69 games over 2 seasons. However, Minnesota was able to clinch that playoff berth they were seeking, as they'd win 47 games only to lose in the first round to the first-seeded Houston Rockets. Butler did have his best season up to that point in the 2017-18 year, finishing 10th in MVP voting and earning all NBA third-team honors. However, the story of Jimmy Butler in Minnesota cannot be told without his famous practice story. After requesting a trade from the team weeks prior, Butler showed up to Timberwolves practice on October 10, 2018, and started calling out multiple members of the team, from players to front office executives. Butler went on to scrimmage against the starters with a group of backups and G League players, as then teammate Jeff Teague went on to describe Butler playing with insane intensity and leading his team to an 18-6 win over the starters. Butler would go on to play 10 games with the Timberwolves that season before having his trade request granted. On November 12, 2018, the Minnesota Timberwolves agreed to send Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton to the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for Jared Bayless, Robert Covington, Dario Saric, and a 2022 second. Butler was now out of Minnesota and had now helped form one of the top starting lineups in the league in Philadelphia alongside Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and JJ Redick. As for Minnesota, they wouldn't even get 82 games from Butler before trading him, as the haul they got back was nothing compared to what they gave up a year prior. The Timberwolves duo of Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins wouldn't last much longer, as Wiggins would be traded in 2020 to the Golden State Warriors. Well, if you thought Butler's stint in Minnesota was short-lived, his Sixers career was even shorter. Butler would appear in 55 games for the Sixers after arriving in 2018, helping bring the team to the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. They take care of the Nets in round 1, as their round 2 matchup was one to remember. Facing up against the Kawhi Leonard-led Toronto Raptors, the Sixers claimed a 2-1 lead before trailing 3-2 in the series. Philly would go on to force a Game 7 in Toronto, leading to one of the most iconic moments in NBA playoff history. With 4.2 seconds remaining and the game tied 90 apiece, Marc Gasol passed Leonard the ball from the sidelines, and it went a little something like this.
Philly. It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger? Game! Series! Toronto has won!
That shot would not only put an end to the Sixers season, but an end to the Jimmy Butler era in Philadelphia. With his contract up and now a free agent in the 2019 offseason, he found a new team and a sign and trade deal was agreed upon. On July 6, 2019, the Philadelphia 76ers agreed to a sign and trade deal that would ink Butler to a 4-year, $140 million contract and send him to the Miami Heat. In exchange, the Heat would send Josh Richardson to the Sixers while also sending away Hassan Whiteside to the Portland Trailblazers. The four-team deal was agreed upon, and the Heat had acquired that star free agent they'd been looking for. Today, Jimmy Butler's move to the Heat has proved to be a winner for Miami. While they haven't won a championship under Butler, they were able to make two NBA Finals, losing to the Los Angeles Lakers in 2020 and the Denver Nuggets in 2023. Butler has had some epic moments along the way, such as upseating the number one seeded Milwaukee Bucks in 2023 after putting up 56 points in a decisive Game 4. As it stands today, though, Butler's future in a Heat jersey remains up in the air. After the two sides failed to agree to a contract extension this past offseason, Butler has the option to opt out of his player option and seek a new deal after the year's over. Regardless of what happens, he's put the Heat in a position to succeed and establish his legacy as a top playoff performer. Now that we're up to date on where Butler is in his career, it's time to take a look back at all those trades that Butler has been a part of to see what each one of those teams was able to turn their assets into, starting off with the Chicago Bulls. As for the Bulls trade haul, it's pretty straightforward. Zach LaVine, who was the top asset from the trade, remains with the team today. As for the other two players, they left the team for little or nothing. Chris Dunn played 149 games for the Bulls before leaving to sign a free agency deal with the Atlanta Hawks. As for Lauri Markkanen, he played 221 games for Chicago before being traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a three-team deal that landed Chicago a 2022 first and a 2023 second to go along with Derrick Jones Jr. Both picks never conveyed to Chicago, while Jones Jr. played 115 games before walking in free agency to Dallas. For the Timberwolves, not much headed their way from Philadelphia in the original trade besides a handful of role players. That 2020 second that they received is a player that remains overseas and was never signed by the Timberwolves. As for the actual players, Jared Bayless would appear in 34 games for Minnesota before recalling it a career. Dario Saric would appear in 68 games before being traded with the 11th overall pick Cameron Johnson to trade up for Jared Culver, a deal that did not work out for Minnesota. Lastly, with Robert Covington, he would play 70 games before being traded alongside four other players for a haul of Evan Turner, Malik Beasley, Juan Hernangomez, and Jared Vanderbilt. Hernangomez was later packaged with Jared Culver to land Patrick Beverley, who was sent alongside Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, and other assets in the deal to land Rudy Gobert. However, it's important to mention the 2020 first that was included in the Robert Covington deal for Minnesota. Through a sequence of trades along with other minor assets, Minnesota turned that first into Jaden McDaniels, Josh Minott, and Jalen Clark, who are all currently players on the team. As for the Sixers, they really got nothing out of Butler given it was a sign-and trade. They get 55 games from Josh Richardson before he was traded with Tyler Bay for Seth Curry. Curry went on to be a small piece of the James Harden trade a few years later, but not enough to really matter. Richardson is now back with the Heat, so the sign-and trade wasn't really anything for Philadelphia. When it comes to ranking the trade hauls, Minnesota has to be in first, given they were able to land an all-defensive wing and starter in Jaden McDaniels from the assets, as well as loading up on pieces to land Rudy Gobert. For second place, it's clearly Chicago, as despite getting nothing from Lauri Markkanen and Chris Dunn, they still have Zach LaVine. Given LaVine's play through the start of the season and trade rumors that have been floated, there's potential future assets for Chicago to come from the effects of the Jimmy Butler trade. Last, it of course goes to the Sixers, who got nothing in return for Butler. Thank you, everyone, for watching me break down the transaction history of Jimmy Butler, as there could be more to come from the Star Wing in the future. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below who you want to see on the next episode. Cheers.